Okay, good morning, everyone. I'll like to call this October 20th meeting of the Select Committee on School Facilities to order. First order of business, could we have a roll call, please?
For the Select Committee for School Facilities, 20th October 2021, Senator Hutchins. Senator Cost.
Here.
Senator Landon.
Here.
Senator Rothfuss.
Excused.
Thank you. Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Harshman.
Here.
Representative Jennings.
Here.
Representative Walters.
Here.
Vice Chairman Brown.
Here.
Chairman Pappas.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business, or second order of business, I guess, is just a few announcements. Please, if you could, mute any cell phone devices or laptop devices so that we can not have any distractions. Also, I just wanted to make sure that there's any housekeeping items that the staff has for us. Anything? No. Okay. All right. So let's begin. School facilities proposed rules. Director Vincent, would you please lead us through the update on the rules?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. If I may, before we do that, after 85 applications and 2 interview processes, we have a new school facilities administrator, and I would like to welcome her today and have her introduce herself to you. I have with us today Valerie Hughes.
Welcome, Ms. Hughes. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning. Thank you. As Jerry mentioned, my name is Valerie Hughes. I am formerly or coming over from the West Coast. I was working for the University of California, San Diego, and part of that UC system tied into the state of California. So I'm very happy to be here in Wyoming. I'm excited, looking forward to everything that it brings and enjoying it so far. So nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to Wyoming.
Chairman, she knows it snows here, right?
Valerie is starting week 3 with us, and for 2 days, we had a full team in our department of all administrators and director actually being hired, not vacant, and permanent, not interim. And then Mr. Mel Muldrow, who is our CM administrator, has decided to retire. We'll be turning over in the next 2 weeks. We'll be turning things over, and he'll be on board to the end of the year for anything in consultation and historical knowledge download. So now we will go back into that mode again. So, but for 2 days we had it all.
Great.
So thank you. So today,
excuse me, Director. For the record, Senator Rothfuss, welcome.
Thank you.
He's here. Continue.
Thank you. So the update today on our end is from us is pretty short because we are in a 45-day comment period and there's not much that we can say. But if you turn to the first tab, we have our summary sheet. And what we've tried to do for the committee is just do even prior to me, over a year ago, go back and try to give the background of how this started, who's been involved in the different committees and meetings, and bring it all the way up through what we called the road show in July, where we traveled the state and listened. There's been a couple of different commission meetings where we've adjusted language, different strike throughs, and it brings us up to on the second page, second page at the bottom, where in the last commission meeting, the department felt like the commission, our department, AG's office, that we had enough of a consensus on all the chapters but 8 that we recommended option 2 at the bottom to go forward with maybe putting the other chapters into comment period so we could hear more, and holding off on chapter 8. The commission chose not to do that and did kind of a hybrid of option 1 and read in some other information and some factors. And that was where the meeting ended. So we are in the 45-day comment period, and we're receiving a lot of comments, actually more than we did during the road show. So if the goal was to put something forward in order to get comments, it appears to be working because the comments are coming in. One thing that the commission did make very clear in the last meeting, that the factors that they chose were a starting point. And they said they want to hear from everyone during the comment period what their input is, and that after the public hearing, which, by the way, our next commission meeting was November 2nd, and the 45-day would have ended right around November 24th, the day before Thanksgiving. And so the commission chose to meet on November 30, so that everybody who wanted to come and make comment could, with the holiday in there. So November 30 is a revised commission date. And on that date, they'll start off with a public hearing. I believe they put an 8:30 to 10 timeframe on that. And then they'll go into the commission meeting. And during that commission meeting, the chair of the commission did say that if there is any input during this 45 days, that they will review it. They will weigh it. I assume somewhere in there, they might ask us as a department to do more diligence on maybe some of those comments, and that they would take it into consideration during their commission meeting after the hearing before they finalized everything. And those are the comments that I was advised that I can make today. And I stand for questions.
Committee, any questions regarding the commission's actions or the department's report? Senator Hutchins.
It would be page 2. The department, like two of the two blackened in tabs
I'm sorry, page 2 of the summary or in chapter?
on this.
Yes.
Okay, page 2. I just had a little note off to the side, and I just maybe would like to see if you can answer it, or if it's even necessary to answer, or if it's further down and I just missed it. The second tab, darkened tab, it says the department received a substantial comment from Laramie County School District 1 on August 13th, the impacts of which, if implemented, were presented to the commission chairman for consideration. Can you touch on those briefly, or is it somewhere in the?
I'm trying to find where you're at. I apologize.
When I say page 2 on tab, the summary sheet. Is it page 3? Oh, is he on electronic?
It's page 2.
Yeah, that's not part of this packet right here, but I think I'm seeing it right here. Okay, may I have this for a second? Okay, thank you. I have it in front of me. Okay,
Thank
could you
you,
please?
sir.
Yeah, thank you. And so the question is, can
The
we
question
elaborate on
is-
what that is?
Yeah, what were some of the substantial comments or a substantial comment that you thought was necessary to put in here, but
Mhm.
there's no real knowledge of what that comment was? I'm
So
in
I-
Laramie County School District.
Yeah, no, thank you. So I'll do my best on what this one would have been on August 13th. We have had a lot of back and forth, not just with Laramie 1, but the other ones. But what this would have called out to me was probably at the time when Laramie 1 came up with a model and a software package, and how all that was completely different than the way we did it before, and had some very interesting points to it and aspects. And that's when we started working with them on the model. And at that time, the commission asked us to continue that dialogue with the district on the model. So that's probably what we were calling out, I'm guessing. Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions? I do have one for the committee, just a comment. At our last meeting, we actually asked to be able to review all the changes to the rules prior to them being put forward. Certainly, Chapter 8 has never really been fully reviewed by us. However, the commission elected to go ahead and issue those rules to the public for public comment. And we really have not had the chance to, there were things missing out of chapter 8 that we didn't review. Certainly all the numbers that were supposed to be in there. I just wondered if the committee had any issues with the final product and the numbers that were put in there. Senator Hutchins?
Mr. Chairman, I don't really have any concerns, but it seems like in public comment, they were concerned with the way things went forward. Some of the comments are, especially in chapter 10, they wondered why some of the numbers were taken out, blah, blah, blah. So that was something that I marked up in my book, that there was a lot of concern from the public as to the way things were done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Personally, I actually, I did make a comment at the last meeting regarding chapter 9, section 8 on value engineering. And I'll make it again, and I'll probably maybe put a public comment in. But in the Romanet A1, it says value engineering review shall occur at the schematic design phase, 10%, design and design document phase, 35%, or as otherwise determined by the department. And I requested that those words or otherwise determined by the department be stricken, because that firstly leads to unlimited number of value engineering reviews, and that's not the intent of value engineering. So with this language still in there, they could submit they could request a 95% review, which is not in my purview. It's actually detrimental. So I will be putting a public comment in there, because apparently they didn't listen to me. Or maybe they don't agree. That's certainly, anyhow, my thoughts on that particular topic. Any other questions, comments, or I open it up to public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll open this topic up to public comment. Is there any public comment out there? Do we have anyone online as well? Okay, thank you. Anyone out there like to speak on this issue? Please come forward. Welcome.
School district up there. I just want to, first of all, begin by thanking Director Vincent. I think since his arrival, and this is, I have a great deal of respect for Mr. Muldrow too, but Mr. Vincent has been incredible at reaching out, engaging the districts, de-escalating frustrations, and trying to work toward collaborative solutions. So I appreciate he and Chair Garland and the members of the commission who have really tried hard to get out and engage the school districts. We wish there were more that we're able to engage, but having come from a smaller school district earlier in my career, I can tell you that a lot of school districts are just trying to keep a head above water. And so it's hard for them to engage these rules and these processes. They're complex, and it takes a lot of time to become acquainted with them. So I want to thank them. I want to thank this committee for giving us a couple of moments to offer some comments. I think our goal as we've gone through this process is to try to find a way to implement Chapter 21 as recently amended by the legislature in a way that's faithful to the intent of what we believe the legislature was trying to accomplish. Our goal is to assure that our students receive an outstanding education. As we all know, our students can be our greatest export in this state, and that needs to stop. And the best way we can do that is to make sure our kiddos get outstanding educations, and it equips them for the best possible path to college. Other kids We need to equip them for the best possible careers that are not college bound. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that every one of our students is life ready out there. And that's the spirit with which we've undertaken our participation in this process. So just to touch on a couple of big rocks that we've been working with the commission on. One of the things we want to try to do, and the reason why we've proposed the vectoring approach versus a weighted approach, is because we want to make sure that one condition doesn't mask another. And what I mean by that is when you weight capacity or you weight condition, it can conceal the one that's given the lesser weight. And so when we try to plot those on a chart, trying to put our heads in a place where we think yours might be during a session, trying to decide which projects to fund and which not. If you get a list that simply shows a conditioned school and the capacity schools aren't readily apparent, I think it makes it hard for the legislature to do its work in terms of deciding which buildings to fund. And so what we tried to do is engage people who were smarter than us, and we spent a lot of time working with the department, trying to say is 45-55, is 70-30 weighting. And then eventually we threw our hands in the air and came up with this vectoring approach. And the reason I like it is because it doesn't conceal one condition or the other. And at some point, if this body would ever care to see it, we'd be delighted to show it to the body as well. But the other thing we did in the vectoring approach is we put a tail on each of the plot points in the vector chart so that it shows the legislature whether in an instance of capacity, whether it's trending upward, or it's trending downward in terms of capacity. As you know, a lot of districts in the state are decreasing in their enrollment right now, but a few of them are continuing to increase in their enrollment, and Laramie County is one of those. And we're deeply concerned about making sure we have facilities for those kiddos as they arrive. The other thing that we've been working hard with the department and the commission on is making sure that capacity is assessed at the building level. I think it's important to look at it in the context of a district level, so that if it makes sense to move kiddos over to the next attendance area, then absolutely we need to do that. And we do not want to duck that in any way. But it's important that when this body is thinking about how to address a remedy in terms of capacity, that you're looking at it at the building level, because that's where the problem exists. And then we can speak to the fact of whether or not there are non-construction remedies within the district by moving kiddos to another portion of the district. The other thing, Mr. Chairman, is the FCI score. It hasn't been assessed. The state statutes require that it gets assessed every 4 years. And I think we're coming up on 6 years since it's last been assessed. So in order for these changes to be meaningful to the legislature and to the districts, I think we've got to put a strong focus on getting our assessment in. The other thing that I would tell you is that as we've been running this vector chart, it's interesting because you can change the inputs in terms of the FCI score. And I think it'll be, if the legislature cares to look at it, interesting for them to play with and see if you change the FCI score from a 0.65, which it is today, down to a 0.45, down to a 0.32, the various numbers that the legislature and the commission or the state construction department have relied on. It's interesting to see what happens. And so as you see in your upcoming session, there aren't going to be any requests for conditioned schools because that no one merits a 0.65 score. So I think it'll be interesting for this body and the legislature to play with. Mr. Chairman, I also agree with your comment on the value engineering. After the 35%, it is a complete redo in terms of having your architect go back and redesign it. The other thing that I would tell you, and I think the staff's heart was absolutely in the right place. The other concern that I have is that the value engineering, the way the rules are written presently, the value engineering, every recommendation of the value engineer is essentially binding. And if you understand the value engineering process, the problem with that is value engineering is a bit of a brainstorming session. So you go in and you throw out crazy ideas and see if they work. But if they all become binding, the fear is that it'll undermine creativity. It'll cause people to not want to stretch. And so I would ask and have asked the commission to consider removing the requirement that all value engineering recommendations are binding unless waived by the director. There's only been one district that's gone through that process. It's us. And it was definitely challenging. And that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, unless there are questions.
Committee, questions? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff, just a quick question for you. The value engineering piece, you and I have spoken offline multiple times, especially in regards to that. I'm just kind of curious out of that. What I understand value engineering to be is a larger scope of looking at what can we do to reduce the overall footprint and or cost, and really look at what's actually going to cost us less. When I look at Cary Junior High is one of the newest schools in the state, if not the newest, and put in there, as it opens up, it's now at 99% capacity. How much value engineering was done on that, and at what stages was it requested on that?
Co-Chair Brown, I joined this district about a year ago. And so I was, if it's okay with you, I'd like to see if Mr. Bartlett, who was involved in that value engineering process, I wasn't on that school. I just joined the district in August of last year, a year ago, August. So I don't have that information. If it would be all right, perhaps we could ask him to speak to that.
Please, Mr. Bartlett.
Mr. Chair, Co-Chair Brown, so we had Cary Junior High was value engineered 35, 60, 95. Then it was put on kind of the back burner because it wasn't funded for construction. Then we brought it back. It was actually value engineered again at 100%. Keep in mind that your question about capacity, the value engineering is not going to address capacity. The capacity of the building is based on the 5-year projection for completion. With Cary, the issue there was we had it designed, I believe in 2013. Then when we put it on the back burner for those 2 years, it was not reassessed, a new projection made. So it was based at the 850 students that it was originally designed at.
So, Mr. Bartlett, just to make sure, you guys value engineered 4 times in your initial, and then a 5th time as it came forward for funding once it was funded. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Bartlett? Committee? Thank you. Any further public comment? No. Okay. I think that wraps up this particular topic. So let's move on to the budget request. Could we have you walk us through there,
Sure.
Tanya?
What's that? Line of sight. Mr. Chairman, at your last meeting, you requested our staff prepare a proposed budget bill in response to the commission's recommendations. And in addition, the select committee also requested an additional $8.2 million for the Riverton High School auditorium be added as well. At this point, I can certainly walk you through the bill if that's your pleasure.
Please.
This is 22 LSO 160 working draft 70. You'll note at the very beginning, there's a staff comment that indicates that the operations and the engineering and technical cost, as well as the major maintenance costs associated that are appropriated to the state construction department, are not included within this bill. Those are in the agency 27. Those are in the agency 27 designation within the budget bill. And I would start the discussion on this noting that This budget has been handled in a couple of ways. Sometimes it has come in a form of a separate bill, as you'll see here, and other times the Joint Appropriations Committee has chosen to put it in as a section 300 within the budget bill. The purpose of walking through the bill today is that that your select committee needs to make a recommendation to the governor and to the Joint Appropriations Committee by November 1st with recommendations for the next biennium. Moving on to page 2, lines 19 through 26, this states that the numbers that are indicated on the tables are as designated by the School Facilities Commission, or in the event it's a legislative priority, that is also indicated. Page 2, line 28 through page 3, line 5. This designates that the leases, modular buildings, professional consulting expertise, and land acquisitions are effective from July 1st of 2022 through June 30th of 2024. Moving on to page 3, lines 17 through 15. This designates that the project amounts for the Laramie County School District #1 capacity, which is an additional $6 million. The funds for component level projects, demolition, unanticipated, and other priorities, which includes Campbell County's demolition, design, construction, and Fremont County 25's auditorium. Those appropriations are effective July 1st of 2022 through completion of the project. Page 3, line 17 through page 4, line 2. This just confirms what's already authorized in statute, and that is that the department has the ability to submit a supplemental budget next year. Page 4, lines 4 through 14. This requires that the department use the estimated schedule provided to this committee in deploying the funds appropriated to the extent practical. Page 4, lines 16 through 21, this confirms that the appropriations are not entitlements nor guarantee, and also restricts expenditures to ensure adequate, efficient, and cost-effective school buildings in accordance with Wyoming statute. Page 5, lines 1 through 11, this is a reporting requirement of the School Facilities Commission and the department back to this committee and the Joint Appropriations Committee and the governor on the deployment of the appropriations that are recommended within this draft. Page 5, lines 13, this begins the discussion of the actual appropriations of the funds recommended by the commission and as directed by this body. Page 5, line 17 through page 6, line 8, this appropriates $1,866,764 for charter school leases. You can find the districts that will receive that money on page 6, lines 5 through 7. Moving on to page 6, lines 10 through 23, this appropriates $109,625 for modular buildings and leases. And again, you can find those listed on lines 18 through 22 on page 6. Moving on to page 7, lines 2 through 19. This section appropriates an additional $6 million to Laramie County School District #1 for the construction of an elementary school to remedy capacity needs. You'll note that these funds are in addition to the funds appropriated in the 2021 Chapter 80, Section 313G Romanet 4. And it does require that those funds be expended prior to expending the additional $6 million. There's also a prohibition on changing the scope or the design of the project and expenditure of these additional funds. You'll note the total for the project is $33,334,007. Page 7, line 21 through page 8, line 18 appropriates $20,826,451 for component level projects. You'll recall that the commission and the department prepared a list, and that list that they have recommended for funding is on page 8, lines 6 through 16. And of course, I'll mention that while the district and that just the project name are noted here, the department did provide at the last meeting detailed information on each of these items. Page 8, line 20 through page 9, line 2. This requires that the district exhaust all other means to fund the component level projects in the previous paragraph, which includes federal funds as well. Page 9, lines 4 through 9, this appropriates $300,000 for professional consulting expertise and other administrative costs to conduct studies approved by the commission to determine the most cost-effective remedies for school districts. Page 9, lines 11 through 23 appropriates $5,091,394 for demolition projects. Then you can find those districts on page 9, lines 19 through 21. Page 10, lines 1 through 8 appropriates $618,351 for the purposes of land acquisitions. You'll note that this requires the commission and the department to report to this body as well as the JAC and the JEC prior to the expenditure of funds appropriated in this particular paragraph. You'll note on page 10, lines 10 through 13, there's an appropriation of $1,504,411 for for unanticipated costs associated with component level projects, demolition projects, and other projects which are identified in paragraph 10. Paragraph 10, which can be found on page 10, lines 15 through page 11, lines 4, appropriates $14,534,466 for two projects, really. Campbell 1, an elementary school design, construction, and demolition. And then as well as Fremont 25, the high school auditorium. You'll note on page 11, line 3, $8.2 million, and that is the legislative priority. Section 2, page 11, lines 6 through 23, transfers money from the major maintenance account within the SIPA, within the strategic investment and projects account, and the school lands mineral royalties account to the school capital construction account. This typically is a budget amendment within the budget. You'll also recall that this committee forwarded a bill 22 LSO 29, and in the event that that is enacted into law, of course, this section 2 will not be necessary. Section 3 on page 12, lines 2 through 4, transfers money from the general fund to the school capital construction account to fully fund the obligations included within that, within this bill, which are approximately $221 million. I would note the $62 million figure is prior to the release of the Craig, I think, which will be released early next week, and that figure will be precised by JAC when they work this particular item. Subject to your questions, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Thank you. Committee, any questions on the bill? Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is on bottom of page 7 and on to page 8. The last couple of years for component level funding, we had moved away from listing what we were willing to spend on those projects, and here we list a maximum amount. In the past couple of years, we have said, just using this as an example, 20.8 million would be available for the projects below, and then task the state construction department really with starting at the top of the list, working their way to the bottom, but finding the way to maximize those dollars to complete as much as possible. And the real intent of that was to try and get the best possible pricing for those types of projects. So I was just curious why this time we have chose to list those maximum amounts, or if there would be a will by this committee to remove those and just go back to the dollar amount listed and the projects listed, but not a dollar for each project maximum amount.
Could I ask staff?
So a couple questions there.
Could I ask staff if there was a particular reason for doing the individual line items?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters, you are correct. That is how it has been passed by the legislature. In a couple of instances in the bill, I used a bill that was presented to this body or to this committee last year in preparation. And so as presented to the select committee, it did include the list. And then I don't know if it was through JAC or through committee action through the select committee that it was changed, but you are correct, as passed by the legislature, it was the one amount with no designation. So certainly it's a policy choice to be made.
Thank you.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. Tanya, the discussion at the end of the total cost. What is the total cost of this bill? What does it come in at? It doesn't come in at 221 because I think that 221 is inclusive of the state construction department budget with major maintenance. Do we know what the actual total appropriation value of all of the projects in this bill is equal to?
We'll have that figure for you in just a moment.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to go back to a very good point made by former Chairman Walters, I think we should consider removing those. As Tanya pointed out, it is very helpful for our select committee to have a look at what these projects are in a ballpark. But I think it's useful going forward. I can give you a hint that if we do put maximum amounts, that's about what the bid's going to come in at. Funny how that works. And so when the time comes, I bet Representative Walters might make a motion on that front. He's got a second for me. So
Thank you, Senator. And those numbers are actually were given to us in a report from the commission. So we do have those numbers. Senator Rothfuss.
And following up on that point, in the past, I think on components, we have also made the list a little bit longer than we expected to be able to fund with the funds that we had available. I think we did that a couple of years ago, if I recall correctly, and basically allowed the commission to go down as far on the list as they could afford with the total amount of money that was available. I think that's generally good practice, recognizing that they might actually be able to combine a couple of projects or get an occasional win and therefore knock something lower off the list. So we might want to contemplate that as well.
And as thank you, Senator. And as you recall, the point down the list where they went was actually higher, and this number represents a lower cut point. So, and frankly, I'm not so sure if we're intending that to be the case. We've got it right down to the dollar. Right? If we're actually not contemplating that, maybe it ought to be a rounded figure like $21 million and just be done with it. And the final thought is that not only in this section, but we might want to look at the other three places where we have breakout projects in the bill. So if anyone's going to make that motion, you might want to tag all three locations. Or that amendment, excuse me. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And just to pick up on good points made by Senator Rothfuss, it goes without saying, and I know the director is on this, knows all about this, but any encouragement on this component level that we can give to our districts to work together. Several of our districts have really done a great job on that front. And I think that goes a long ways too. And there's always opportunity for some collaboration, and that helps us to get further down the list too. But I think it's important that we give some approval there so that the department can continue on and utilize those funds adequately. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, we have the figure that was requested by
Okay,
Senator
please.
Rothfuss, and that's $50,851,462.
Was that 15?
50.
50.
50.
Can you repeat that one more time, Tanya, please?
Sure. $50,851,462.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tanya, on page 10, maybe a silly question, but line 13. How do you come about this figure? Do you do it via some kind of calculation, some percentage? It just seems kind of interesting that an unanticipated cost would be such an odd figure. Can you tell me how you come about that figure? Or how does that come about?
Good question. Senator, the commission and the department provide that number based on, I think, a percentage of the component level demolition and other projects. But Laura's actually shaking her head, so she's the best person. Perhaps she can answer that question.
Okay.
Ms. Anderson, could you shed some light on it for us?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hutchings, that is done as a percentage of the other, not component, but just component. It is track component, demolition, construction, basically all of the projects that are in there. We do it as a percentage of that. We get that percentage by working with the Economic Analysis Division over at A&I as far as the economics and where they feel like the inflation factors are going. And we do that as a percentage that this was calculated as 6% of those projects. Is that helpful?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Hutchins.
As I read through the bill, on page 11, I'm really 10 and 11. Let's go back. This is titled on page 10, line 15. It says other school buildings and facility priorities. And when I look at that, I'm thinking, wow, we really need this badly. The house is burned down. We need another place to live in. Your shoes are wearing through the bottom and water's getting in, snow's getting in. And then I look at page 11 and I see that auditorium. That really bothers me. I know they've been 25 years without an auditorium. I know they're going to the college. I think that's what I was told, to use their auditorium. And I'm just wondering how we can justify $8 million at this stage in Wyoming's history where we have a lack of funds. How can we justify this auditorium?
Thank you. Any comments from commissioners? We discussed this at our last meeting, and it was at least I believe it was the intent of this body to, since we've rolled it back so many times and they've been put back and it's been years, that we need to finally make them whole. And I think that was the intent. Am I mistaken? Senator Rothfuss.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think it is a matter of curing an ill that has slipped through the cracks for a lot of years based on the way that we run this show, where we have a system and that system doesn't provide for the possibility of identifying that auditorium as a component, as major maintenance, as anything else. So we recognize that we have a high school in the state that was built at a time when funds were short. This is prior to the current system. We never would have built it that way under the current system. There's just no way they would have had an auditorium. There's no question about it. So we have then many years that have passed where they haven't had what every other school would have were we to build it. And at that point, it's an inequity. When you have inequitable educational provision, that's effectively a violation of the Wyoming Constitution. They haven't been complaining about that. They really just come in and ask us to make it whole, and they have for quite a few years. I think they've been more than patient and cooperative with us to provide good quotes, reasonable remedy, and to work with us on the timeline. This has been on the radar of the select committee for as long as I've been on the select committee, is something that we've needed to tackle. So that's 11 years now I've been looking at it, and I think people have been looking at it longer than that. So yeah, there's never a good time to spend $8.2 million on a new auditorium. Next year won't be a good year either, and last year wasn't one. It just comes down to the fact that at some point, we have to do the right thing, step up and recognize that this is a priority project. And I think that is our role as a select committee to identify where we're not doing the right thing and then provide for that opportunity for the district. So I'll continue to support it. And I understand that times are tough, but again, every year, I think I've been on the select committee, we've talked about how times are tough and that's generally the case. So it's a matter of prioritization and that's one that I think we can, as we look at the budget, particularly as we look at Craig that's coming up, we see how things are going to be, anticipating what we see there. This is probably a good year to make that remedy when we don't have any other huge projects that have to go through. You know, other years we have $50, $75 million projects that are new buildings that we have to jam through. We don't have one of those in this budget. So it's probably as good of a year as we're going to have in the upcoming future to solve this problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other thing, and I know that Senator Ruff has already alluded to it, is the fact that this was a bonded school. Before we were actually taking care of the schools, they had to cut their budget back to meet the bond, and so they were unable to make the auditorium at that time. All the rest of our schools that we funded have the auditorium, so I think it's just right to get this done. Senator Ruffus is right. It's been a long time coming. I think it's time that we step up and in one way or another say 8 million or not, we need to do the project.
Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of a follow-up. So with this being on the list, does that mean it's just included in the list, or this is just something we're gonna do? How does this work with this select committee, since I'm new on it? Because they still have heartburn. I mean, if my pockets are empty, I would never go out and try to buy a new car. I don't care how badly I needed it. I wouldn't do it. So again, this auditorium at a day and a time when we're trying to separate people instead of putting them all in one spot, I'm still concerned about it. Not to say that they don't need it, but it's like, how often will it be used? What are they going to use it for? Again, is this going to be done, or is this a project that we're hoping will be done?
Senator Landon.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll take a stab at that for the good senator. The process on our select committee is to take recommendations from our commission and who receive those bits of information from our districts out there, 48 of them. And it's all distilled down and it comes to us in the form of recommendations from a commission. The select committee often steps above and beyond what that recommendation is. And that's because we represent the state of Wyoming. And we have come across several projects through the years that we have decided as a select committee to recommend to our colleagues that we fund above and beyond what districts even have recommended or that the commission has recommended. I use Saratoga and Big Piney and Pine Bluffs and Sheridan. I could make a list about 3 times that long of projects that we have decided as a select committee to accomplish. The Big Piney thing, for example, was a Title IX issue that we wrote in and said that is not adequate. As Senator Rothfuss says, we decided 2 or 3 years ago upon a motion of the select committee that it's not right to have a school the size of Riverton, for example, that does not have an auditorium. It's an equity issue. Those students deserve to have a place where they can gather, a place where they can perform, an adequate place where they can hold a big classroom environment, for example. Every other school that size in Wyoming has it. So the select committee decided to include it. This will be a recommendation, this bill, which includes that particular project. This will be a recommendation that we will carry to the legislature. It starts with the Appropriations Committee, and we will work it through the 27 or so steps that it takes to get all the way through. And we'll have lots of conversations in the House and Senate, and away we go. So I hope that helps. That's the process.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hutchins.
you did a phenomenal job. That helped me more than anybody's other comments, to understand, what you're doing here. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions? Do I hear any, do I have a motion?
Yeah, I think.
Public comment before we do that? Okay. Public comment on the, Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We've discussed it briefly before, but I would like to hear if there is any update or any further consideration on the $4 million demolition project in Fremont 25. That's a lot for a demolition project, and I just wanted to check in on it again. It's probably the best we can do, and I recall that there were some concerns about the challenges there, but is there any possible way for us to reduce that or do a better job by that $4 million demo project?
Thank you, Mr. Severson. Welcome. Perhaps you have an answer for the good senator.
I have a response. We'll see if it's an answer. Mr. Chairman, Paul Severson, Design and Construction Administrator for the State Construction Department. You are correct. This project has been talked about for a long time. We've had some champions who basically wanted to try to save this building. The school district has gone through a lot of effort trying to save the building. They can't find another use. And so they basically have come to the conclusion they would like to remove it from their inventory. They have in excess of 250,000 square feet they're not using. This one's about 70,000, and they'd really like to remove it from their inventory.
Senator or Representative Walters.
Follow up, this is the TAC building, if I'm not mistaken, and part of that high demolition cost is the asbestos abatement that will need to take place for the demolition.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Walters is correct. The building was formerly the Riverton High School, so it was a full high school at one point in time. The construction techniques that it was put together with, we don't use anymore, and it did include a lot of asbestos. So we have very high asbestos costs that we are assuming are going to be associated with this project. Another one of the issues is they don't have a landfill close by, so everything that has to be pulled out of that building has to be trucked very long distances. Then there is another issue directly behind the building. There is currently a former stadium. It was called Tonkin Stadium. It is a big depression in the ground. Part of the funds are also to bring that back up to grade so that the site would be usable for an additional use in the future. So there's several things that go together to make this quite costly.
Thank you. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I hope with a little latitude I can, since we have Paul here. Paul, I have a question. Can you help refresh my memory as to what stipulations we put on buildings that belong to school districts out there? This building, for example, if we choose not to demolish, and the district would have, say, an opportunity to sell it, what restrictions are on that building? And I ask that because up the river, I was told by some folks that when they sold that property to a private investor or whatever, that they couldn't do anything with that property for 10 years. And I'm talking about the little community up northwest of where we're talking about on this demolition. But can you help me with that? I told them that I would try to find out, and you're the best guy I can think of.
Mr. Chairman, in response to Senator Landon, we've had a number of changes in statute regarding disposition of buildings in recent years. In the legislative 2020 session, there was a new stipulation that was added that any costs that are recovered in the sale of a property have to be returned to cover the cost associated with demolition. This project in particular, since it was prior to 1997, any funds that they did recover from this, if it was not demolished, those funds would go to the district. Statute does encourage them to utilize them for facility needs, but I don't think there's any way, you know, that could be locked in, but it does encourage that use. So they do have the opportunity to do that. They have extensively gone out through their community trying to find uses for it. We had another senator a few years ago who spent quite a bit of effort trying to find additional uses for this building, of which they did never really materialize. So they just turned out not really to be options. So it's not for lack of effort, because they have tried.
So follow up, Mr. Chairman. So in the little district west of there, when a school building property is sold like that, can you help me with what stipulations we put on at the state level? For example, we say, district, you can go ahead and sell your building, but you can't do something with that property for a given amount of time. I can't find that in our statutes. Can you help me with that, Paul?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, that's not in anything that I'm aware of, and I've only got a decade's worth of experience here, but I haven't seen anything that stipulates that they have to wait some period of time.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. It could perhaps be a municipal sort of issue or a county commission issue. I don't know. I'll have to check in on that, but thank you for helping me with that issue.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon did also bring back a deed restriction that was identified associated with this building that we are discussing right now in demolition. And the deed restriction does identify that if it is not continued for an educational use, it will be reverted to the town of Riverton. So if they would elect to dispose of the property, it would go back to the town of Riverton.
Okay. Committee, further questions? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the regrading of the Tonkin Stadium, how much is that of the $4 million? Do you have a sense?
I do remember it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I have to admit, I see a lot of numbers. I don't remember that one in particular.
Was there no use or utility for the stadium afterwards? I mean, I think back to our DTI stadium when we took down the high school. We kept the stadium, and so it still has use. The school district still uses it. As a matter of fact, it's available for the city also in a partnership there. I can see knocking down the school, but I'm a little curious about why we need to regrade that football field.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, in particular, the associated facilities with the stadium, they've had it fenced and prohibit use because there are some dangerous situations with that stadium. So their desire is to get rid of any of the improvements associated with that stadium because it's just not a safe environment. So they do prevent use of it right now. So it is literally an area that they try to keep people out of. And those facilities, like so many others that we know, also have the asbestos issues that have to be taken care of in association with them as well. If the property was to be reutilized in the future by the school district, the depression that the stadium does create would make it unsuitable for an additional use. So it would be anticipated, and our discussions with the district have included maintaining it within their inventory and using it as open space that they can use for their school district. But in the case of a future need, it would be a very good property for a future facility if that need did occur.
Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Well, I can see taking out anything that's a hazard, but again, I just pulled up a picture of the last game and I'm looking at the field and I think of the potential utility for that for soccer between now and when it gets used again or anything else. It's a great, appropriately leveled, appropriately sized grass field that seems like between now and when a school is built there, you'd want to just keep it as a field, an open field that's accessible. So doing a regrade and doing groundwork, earthwork on it, honestly doesn't make sense until you have a project. When you have a project, if you're building a new school there, you're going to do earthwork anyway. So I guess it doesn't make sense to me that you would regrade it in any way as part of the demo project, although I can see taking out any hazards and getting rid of anything that would require maintenance. Is that what's anticipated, or are they really planning on leveling the berms and just making a wide open space of it?
Mr. Chairman, the understanding of what they would intend would essentially to create an open space, of which case I can imagine if they had a need for soccer fields or some other purpose, they could utilize it for that. But we have not had discussions about particular use they would have for that.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Costa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other thing, they talked at all about selling that land where it's right up there on the edge once the high school building's torn down. That would be an opportunity, and then that money could be utilized for purchase of another area. You know, it's only close to that elementary that's right there. As far as them being close enough to the high school or whatever to run soccer or anything, it seems like it's totally out of position. I'm just wondering if there's other options where we wouldn't have to be putting that kind of money into it, at least right now.
Mr. Chairman, we recognize the input that you're giving right now. We have worked through the remedy that we've proposed in the funding with the school district, and it's been approved by the commission. At this point, you know, what we're talking about is a remedy that's established, and that doesn't mean the conversations can't continue, but at this point, what's been presented to you is a remedy that's been presented by the district, been approved by the commission.
Thank you, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you proceed with this demolition, I would encourage you to work with the Department with DEQ here within the state, as they're in the process of capping and finishing the dump site in Shoshone, Wyoming, which is a short distance away. And I know they've taken some material from a lander there and are using it to help with that capping process, which may lessen the asbestos abatement costs some if they don't have to haul it all the way to Salt Lake for abatement. So like I said, we'll just encourage those conversations to take place.
Mr. Chairman, we do realize there's a lot of time-related elements associated with this. And again, if this would not move forward, then there's a possibility that landfill could be gone by that point in time.
Any further questions, Mr. Severson? Maybe? Thank you, Paul. Okay, so let's have any public comment regarding the budget before we take action. Public comment? Okay, seeing none. Committee, what's your pleasure?
I'll move the bill.
Second.
Okay, we have Senator Landon moved it and somebody over here seconded it, Representative Walters. Okay. Any discussion on the bill? Discussion?
Go ahead, sir.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On bottom of page 7, starting in line 21, moving on to page 8, for those component level projects, I would move that we change on line 23, the dollar amount from 20.8 million to 21 million even, and then remove the maximum amounts that are listed on lines 6 through 16 of page 8. And just change the language to simply say that there would be $21 million available for the component level projects listed below in priority rank, or listed below, excuse me.
Okay, and we have a second on that. Thank you, Senator Cost. Any discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just offer the quick point that 5 or 6 years ago, the state had enough money that we were funding every component level project that came in. As the state's budgets became more constrained, there wasn't enough money to cover all of the projects. And so now by just designating an amount of money to accomplish the most projects possible is sort of the new norm for these component level projects. And by listing the maximum amount, I fear we don't take advantage of the ability to get the best pricing available for the projects. This also gives the department the flexibility that maybe number 6 on the list is a higher priced one, but they can get 7 and 8 done and skip 6. And so it's really about how we can stretch these dollars to get the most work done possible.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the amendment has been adopted. Further amendments? Senator Rothfuss.
The other side of that concept is potentially expanding the list a little further to provide more flexibility and more options in case we do have available funds in that $21 million to stretch them further. I don't know what the next 3 items on the list are, but it doesn't really matter. I'll make a motion to add 3 more in priority to the list so that we actually have a little bit of excess in terms of the possible projects. If they save money, we'll add 3 more to the list. They'll have the opportunity to do those. Now, if they don't have enough money, they just wouldn't reach those. So it won't change the expenditure in any way, but it'll give more flexibility to the department and commission to get more work done. So my motion is effectively on page 8, beginning on line 16, insert the next 3 priorities for components, which I guess would be 12, 13, and 14, whatever those may be.
Second. Okay, we got a motion by Senator Rothfuss and a second by Co-Chairman Brown. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing
Mr.
none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, did we have a?
I just have a quick technical question, Senator Rothfuss, and it would be increasing that $21 million. No, okay.
No.
Well, I have a question about that then, because the last motion with regard to the component projects eliminated that list. Is that correct?
No, the list is still there. The only thing that was eliminated were
okay.
the amounts.
I apologize. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, so we'll just add 3 projects to this list. The
Yeah.
list will still be in the statute.
Same dollar value, Mr. Chairman,
Yep.
and no dollar values after it. So basically continuing the list for 3 more to provide a little more flexibility in case we have savings.
Okay, great. Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, what the good senator is doing is allowing us to give that prior approval. Because if the department doesn't have that approval on those next 3 projects, they would have to come to a halt, even though they might have some of this appropriation left over. And so this just allows work to continue. So.
Yeah, good amendment. Okay, seeing no more discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that amendment is adopted. Further amendments, committee?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I would like to make a motion. There is a project that's been on my mind for a couple of years, and this is one that I would make. There also is a couple of schools that have come to our attention up in my neck of the woods, and I might allow that to be a second motion, or we can include all 3 of these, but I'll just jump in. I think it's important, committee, that we continue our work on the 10 Sleep School. For whatever reason, it was left off of this list at the top of page 11. And I believe we ought to put a placeholder there. And there's a number of reasons. The biggest one, of course, is that I don't want us to forget about that school. I think we're in the design phase right now. That should be completed somewhere around this time of year next year, perhaps even sooner than that. If we were to go ahead with this construction amount, and I would suggest in the amendment, $30 million as a placeholder for this K-12 school, we could go right into a bid process next fall and be ready to go in the spring of 23, 22, a year from this coming spring, and take advantage of that opportunity to bid at a proper time of year. If we don't include this construction amount, you guys, it delays this project by as much as 16 to 18 months. In my mind, that's just not adequate. I would like for us to represent this project. I realize it's got a ways to go and we need to present this to appropriations, et cetera. But I would like for us to consider 10 Sleep and an amount of 30 million as a placeholder. There are two schools that came to our attention up in the center part of the state. The district up there has been working very hard on its own to try to get arms around two schools. Each of those for 5 million, I think, could be renovated. I might ask for some help from Representative Walters, and maybe he can walk you through those two schools. I don't know if we want to include this in one motion on the list, Mr. Chairman. If we want to vote on the 10 Sleep project first, or if we want to take all three, but I would ask that maybe Representative Walters could add to what I've told you about two schools up in our neighborhood.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I did want to just chat about 10 Sleep, and if we want to go there first before we go on to the other two.
Let's keep them separate.
Okay. So with regard to 10 Sleep, my impression was that we were going down that path as expeditiously and directly as we could. We committed to that. Was that 2 years ago? So I guess I would ask why it isn't included if we need more funds for it. I don't know how we got where we are if 10 Sleep is going to be delayed by this. I thought we were going through our typical steps and that we would see it coming for construction funds as soon as we were ready for construction funds. I don't know if anybody has an answer to that question or whether we need to go back to the commission to find out what's up with 10 Sleep, but I guess that's my question is why isn't that in our budget request?
My recollection, we'll ask the department, but my recollection was that it would be handled in a supplemental budget because construction wouldn't be available until after the following session. But Director Vincent, maybe you can enlighten us.
Well, I'll certainly try. So Mr. Chair and Senator Rothfuss, 10 Sleep doesn't come through our department to commission to you through the traditional process. It doesn't have capacity. It doesn't generate the building. So that's why we don't push it forward as qualifying for construction. It doesn't mean it's not a good project and doesn't need to occur. It doesn't come through the capacity formulas and methodology that the department currently has, and probably not the ones that would be proposed as well. So it comes through us in a non-traditional way, is my understanding.
Senator Rothfuss.
Yeah, I understand that we were the impetus a few years for it, but I guess what I'll ask moving forward is any project that we put in queue needs to come through the queue and we're not we don't have an independent commission or department that is or LSO following the timelines of projects. It still is the department and the commission that is following the timeline. So my expectation is that when they have reached conclusion of design, they are queued, they will build. And I need to know what the timeline is for when we need to fund that next step so that we are not the source of delay for the project. So my question is this the time when we need money to release as good Chairman Landon was discussing, or do we have enough time that we wouldn't need to release that? But now that I think about it, there's got to either be more design funds in this budget, or there has to be building funds, or we're doing it wrong.
So, Mr. Chair and Senator Rothfuss, we can do that. We can certainly, and I like what you're saying. In the short time I've been here, I see projects that we've designed, they sit on the shelf. You know, like what's next step? Either they lost enrollment, they don't qualify in capacity, or they weren't funded. You know, and our concern has always been, you know, from my past, before I got here, that the clock is ticking where those plans aren't good anymore, either in terms of code changes or it's not the way we educate. So I think that maybe the department's position before is that we use the tools that are approved through the commission to present, but I don't see any. There's nothing that's coming to my mind right now that says that we can't do a white paper on, we started things and we didn't finish them. And we just thought LSO might want to let you know, and the commission as well. I don't see any reason why we can't do that. Yeah, thank you.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of thoughts. Really appreciate Senator from Albany County. He's lived it. I mean, we did this over in Albany County and set one on the shelf. And to the gentlemen in the back of the room, they know what I'm talking about. That's part of the frustrations that we run into is all of a sudden, you know, the rug gets jerked or we just haven't filled the pipeline. And so then we have to roll back in on Cary Junior High School and you know, do all kinds of redesign and all kinds of asks of the architect. That's part of what I'm trying to prohibit here. We know that we want this K-12 10 sleep school built. We've already approved it. Let's get the construction money in the hopper so that thing can expedite and be on the ground someday. And I think it's really one of the most appropriate things we can represent to our Appropriations Committee. That's part of what we do on this select committee is we represent all of those 98,000 square miles out there and all of this fleet of school buildings. We need to let our colleagues know that, hey, we need the funding to finish this school up. So thank you, Director, for your comments as well.
Yes, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, I believe I'm understanding this correctly. So prior to this amendment, we'd be sitting at roughly $62 million being diverted from the general fund over to the school capital construction. The way this amendment would work is that would be boosting that up to 92 million. And then as we look forward to this is going to go to the Appropriations Committee and they're going to decide whether or not we have that additional 30 million as well. So am I correct in understanding that?
Senator Landon.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to take a stab at that. And to the co-chairman, that's exactly the process. This is our recommendation, as I've mentioned to the good senator. You know, this is our recommendation and our best representation of our interim work. And, you know, we're going to be back up, not even to the level of many of the years that I've served on this committee in terms of what budget we're going to be recommending, even with 100 million or 110 million, 120 million added to our major maintenance. We're still going to be in the ballpark of about what we have, the kinds of budgets that we've operated under for many years. But yeah, it's going to go through lots of steps. We've got a member of the Appropriations Committee right here, and he may have some comments on that, but the bottom line is this is our recommendation.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And why this didn't get presented sooner, I think is a matter of a timing issue. From when the contracts for the level 1 and 2 planning got started and when the budget from State Construction and School Facilities Commission has to come in, all of that somewhat overlapped. And so then it really puts this out of sync with the regular timing that would come in. And so by delaying until the supplemental budget of next year, then we end up putting things back that 16 to 18 months that Senator Landon was speaking of. And it's really just an inconvenient timing factor that has been born in this situation. And so it really makes sense to try and move this ahead currently so that we keep this project on schedule to go from the design phase right into the construction phase. And ultimately, it's a cost savings to the state of Wyoming by doing this. Because if we delay the project until the supplemental budget, the plans will then have to be reviewed a second time, which costs money, plus the cost of materials and all of that. There will be the inflationary factor that gets added on to that unnecessarily when really it's just a timing issue as to why this wasn't presented sooner.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My recollection was the cost of this project was closer to $20 million for the remedy that we had seen previously, but I was trying to find where we had that. We got it 2 or 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. We got an estimated cost. Do we have a better estimate than 30? If it's 20, it would be probably better to put something closer to 20 in this budget.
Correct.
Close, Paul, that's the question. Mr. Chairman, in response to Senator Rothfuss's question, admittedly, we haven't remodeled the budget on this one. I just quickly pulled up what we had, and I'm going to tell you, we haven't touched this since May of this year. And we do know from situations we're having with other projects, we're having difficulty determining what values are appropriate for construction at this point in time. But I can tell you at the point in time when we modeled it last, we were looking at a number in the $27.5 million range. So just to help you understand what that is, when you funded for design, you did not fund all of design. You funded the design process, getting it through the document phase. There's still more work in the design work that was not funded. So this did include some additional funds associated with design that were not given originally, plus the construction costs. I just hesitate in giving you that $27 million number, knowing there's a lot we don't know these days. So 30 million is definitely more comfortable than where we are, but I can't tell you if that's going to be more or less. We're going through the exercise on other projects right now. We're guessing. I'm just going to have to admit we're guessing.
Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate Mr. Severson. Thank you. And that's not a bad guess on my part, was it? So, yeah, I'm kind of happy with that. So, but I think, I wonder if we could word the motion to include an opportunity that we could put a more specific amount in there. Or if you think that's necessary, committee, I'm pretty comfortable with a placeholder of 30 million. We know that's going to be pretty darn ballpark to what we're going to have. But if we need a specific amount, I'm looking at our appropriations colleague down here. I would say maybe we could go forward with 30 and then maybe get a report along the way that would be more specific, if that makes sense.
Senator Hutchins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You guys are kind of losing me. I'm new on the committee, and you guys are talking about a lot of things that you know a lot about. And as I look at what's going on, portion on page 11 that I was concerned about, the auditorium, now the auditorium is pregnant with twins. Senator Rothfuss added something, and now Senator Landon wants to add something. So it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and more money is being added to the priority. I get where you're coming from. And then Representative Walters mentioned something like, we need to do this now because we've done studies or design phase and the money we spent there. And then the gentleman from the maintenance department jumps up and says, ooh, we haven't touched that since May. So you're saying maybe 20.5 million, but ooh, maybe closer to 30. So why don't we just put in 50? It's getting kind of convoluted to me. What's going on here? So you're kind of losing me on this bill. The more people that have been here the longest keep adding things at this last moment when we're just about ready to vote on it. So can somebody help me there? Because you could pass it out, but you may be a no from me now because, like I say, the auditorium has twins now that I don't know what's going on, really. Thank you.
certainly this project has been in the hopper and you're right, you probably didn't know a lot of the background on it. The intent for the bringer of the amendment is to make sure we don't have the delay. You know, I certainly understand that when projects are ready to bid, we can't wait and miss an entire construction season. And I think that's the intent of putting a placeholder now so that when this thing is ready to bid, that the approved funds or the funds have been approved. So, but I'll let someone else answer as well. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Senator, the projects that we end up seeing in the budget are staged over a number of years, and you've seen that report from probably the first meeting we had, where we have the large fold-out flow chart that goes out probably 6 years and has it's nearly impossible to read, but it does provide a good at least overview of the workflow of which projects are underway, when they were started, and what stage they're in. So we end up typically with a preliminary planning, some like phase 1 planning, which kind of gets into remedy and solutions. And then we end up with design phase afterwards, and that ends up taking another year or so typically. And then we need to get to the construction phase. So as we work through and approve things, approve projects, then the project continuity is kind of what we're talking about, both with this 10 Sleep School and to some degree the high school auditorium, although the plans for that are probably less complicated than the plans that we're talking about for the school. The concern that Chairman Walters raised was the idea that if you delay and you add too much of a gap between when you design and when you build, you end up having to design again. And we've done that many times, which is why you're hearing a lot of sensitivity to it. So you pay for the design and you pay $1 million for that design. And then you pay $500,000 to get those designers to come back and make sure that the designs are still good because codes have changed. And honestly, I can't count the number of millions of dollars we wasted over the years in doing just that, where we shelved a project for a little while so that we could save, in quotes, money today, when all it did was cost the state, cost the taxpayers. It's just that we kicked it off to the next budget and we wasted money. So I am sensitive, and I know other members are sensitive to the idea of anything that starts in the queue, once it gets going, unless there's a sound reason to abandon the project or delay that project. Once you start the project, you need to finish the project, or we're just throwing away money. And 10 Sleep is one of those projects where we had a lot of debate about it 2 years ago, 3 years ago, as to whether we were going to put it in the queue. We had good presentations from folks from that community that were showing why we needed a new school in 10 Sleep. And at the time, the select committee was convinced that it was important to start that process. So the surprise to me was that we were getting to the point where we were going to lead to a delay. I didn't expect that to be the case. I thought we were on track. And so that's why I'm a little bit surprised that we didn't have appropriate budget in place for that already in this. What we're hearing is that it'll delay about 16 or 18 months, that project, which again could lead to additional costs. We know it'll lead to inflation, but honestly, the redesign ends up just being truly money thrown away as well. So the view that I've taken on since I've been on the select committee is once we start a project, you finish the project or we waste money. And 10 Sleep is one of those projects that falls into that category. As to other projects, honestly, we've got the auditorium, we've got 10 Sleep, and everything else is already in construction phase that I can think of that we have that. But I do appreciate the director going back and checking to see if there's anything else that's shelved that we've overlooked. And I don't know what those would be, to be quite honest. And maybe other members of the committee can think of something else that's out there that we haven't looked at or talked about. But those are there was a motion 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whenever that was, that basically put 3 of these projects in queue. One of them is 80% complete, and like in construction. So we've already got that queued and basically concluded. 10 Sleep was further behind and needed design. And then the high school auditorium in Riverton was the third from that little group. I hope that helps to clarify kind of the history of how we got where we are and why this seems to be coming up, but really it has been on the radar for a while.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It does help, but it's like, I'm still like, why didn't it come up before we got the bill drafted and it was in there? And it's like, now we have a big surprise. So just a thought. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, further comments on this?
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think sitting in the middle, it's kind of interesting to hear both sides here because I simply agree with both sides. It's a very interesting concept, and what I think we risk doing here with this motion, there is and I don't know that technically we've even made a motion in a second. I don't remember if we did or not, but what I fear we're doing is setting precedents as well, which is not all that bad. That we say, hey, we're going to go spend $1 million on the design and the development of design, and then we're going to put the money right up for construction so we can get going with it. It's happened in this community and it's happened in a few other communities across the state. It's not all that bad to go ahead and move on to that position. Maybe this is a good precedence to keep that motion moving forward. Because what happens is we pay that $1.5 million and then we sit back on it because we don't have the money on it, and we don't, it happened with Cary Junior High. We spent, extra money, and it got shelved for an additional 2 years, which cost us inflationary adjustments of 8% at a minimum. So this isn't such a bad idea to just get it moving here. Maybe it's something this committee should look at doing in the future, as opposed to separating them and waiting to get these designs. Maybe we actually look at doing design and construction and moving that all forward. I think I understand the process to slow it down. There's a case for a little bit of bureaucracy here and every once in a while, but at this point, it seems to me that what we've been doing over the past is certainly not the way that we want to work with this, especially in today's date when we hear that we haven't touched it since May, and that extra $3 million, I'm not even so sure would be enough to cover the inflationary costs that we've seen over the past 8 months. So I'm inclined to support this motion because I do think it's the right thing, but it is a complete change. And I think it's a little bit of I don't want to say slap in the face, but it is a little bit of a slap in the face to those that were in this similar position multiple years ago that we've decided to not fund and push back and hold back. It puts them in a sticky situation of why not me? Why was I pushed back and why was I not able to be funded the way that we're funding 10 Sleep? So I just want to make sure that we're all careful in what we're doing here and setting precedents. So, as we move forward, maybe it's something this committee looks at next interim is rewriting that language. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a motion and a second. Okay. Any other comments on this amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the amendment is adopted. Okay, further amendments, committee? Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Remaining here on this page 10, page 11, section 10 of the bill regarding buildings and facilities. I would make a motion for $12 million for 2 schools in Natrona County School District, and these are elementary schools, for some renovations to these 2 schools. And really what's going on in this, if I have a second, I'll explain. I'll save the committee the time of explanation if there's not a second.
We have a second, Senator Landon.
All right, very good. These are 2 elementary schools in Natrona County that are lower on the list for full reconstruction, but the district has done some preliminary work and discovered that for far less than rebuilding and replacing these entire schools, they can renovate these schools, as they have done in a couple other situations within the district, and extend the life of these schools for 25 to 30 years minimum, if not longer. These schools have good structures, good bones to them, if you will. Their teaching spaces have just become outdated, have lost the ability to be good functional teaching spaces. As we see earlier in this bill that's before us, we have a $33 million elementary school that will be built this year here in this good county. And the district in the center part of the state is really trying to avoid more of these $30+ million elementary schools by upgrading and renovating a couple of the existing elementary schools that are in place. One of the schools had the school for the deaf attached to it, and that created a unique situation because it was leased space for the school for the deaf. As leased space, it was not eligible for major maintenance, causing that portion of the school to fall further into disrepair because the lease cost or lease amount wasn't enough to cover the major maintenance side of that. So that was a uniqueness. And as this committee is probably aware, the members that used to attend, or the folks that used to attend that school for the deaf and all other special needs students are now fully integrated into our existing classrooms and the schools where their counterparts attend school. And so the need for that school for the deaf is no longer there. So that, again, these are good buildings, good bones, and this is a very good way, responsible way to save the state money by renovating good structures as opposed to throwing them out and starting over with new. The reason we come before you or mention this today is the district has put the money in to get these projects to a shovel-ready stage. And now they'd like the state to help out with the completion of the construction side of this. These projects are ready to go. And like I said, they instead of $33 million full replacements, they're $6 million to get 25 or 30 years minimum of life out of these buildings. So that's kind of the background on that, on what's going on here. And the two schools, just so the committee is aware, it would be Pine View School and Evansville School. The Evansville Elementary School is in a east side of town, and the east side of Casper in this census has seen a 34% increase in population just in the last 10 years, more than any other part of the Natrona County area. So that's a little background and a little bit of history, and I would try and answer any questions.
Yes, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I appreciate Representative Walters giving an outline of this. It came to us this fall. One of the reasons I seconded is that, boy, does it make a lot of sense. And it is one of those facilities, by the way, Pineview, that did have some planning money, did have some design money involved with it, and it got put on the shelf a long time ago, if I recall. That school for the deaf that is attached to that little school, honestly, at the state level, we should do something with that. The consideration today is whether or not we want to begin the policy discussion on these two schools, and it makes sense to me. There are two schools up in Natrona County that someday when we have a meeting up there, I hope that we can go tour those buildings. That district has done a remarkable job with Dean Morgan and Park. Renovations for about $5 million. And as Representative Walters pointed out, those schools now have 40 more years left. It's a remarkable way that you can move these schools down the road to a great long life to come. I think it's worth our consideration. I realize it's more. The senator's right. It's more, and that's going to be a heavier lift, but I think it makes sense.
Thank you, Senator. Could I have the department give us some background and some information on these two schools?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start first with the Pineview School. The state funded full design for that project. I believe it was in 2013. We proceeded with design. 100% construction documents have been on the shelf since 2017. So that project was designed previously.
Remember stuff.
You just have mumbling back up here. Paul, you're good to go.
Sorry, I'm just proud of my memory of it.
At the time, it was actually funded as a capacity school. Condition, it was a little lower on the condition list. But the school itself is, I believe it's it's a 2-3 section school. And I think the new design was a 4-5. So it was a little different configuration when it was redesigned. But like I say, when we completed 100% drawings in 2017, it was shelved. So that would be a tear down as opposed to what Senator Landon was suggesting. The design is for full removal of the school and reconstruction of a new school. But we literally have not touched that project in 4 years. And the Evansville,
I'm sorry, just one thing on the Pine View. I want to say Pine Bluffs, Pine View. This, it's interesting you're bringing these up because we've had these conversations in-house, and this, Mr. Chair, goes to what Senator Rothfuss and what you all are saying. This is a design that, due to the methodologies and capacities, is shelved, just like Paul has said. And we've been discussing it because it's out there at that verge of, is there code changes, is there everything? And is that $2-3 million on design go by the wayside and we start all over again? So I'm glad to hear you bringing these up, you know, in terms of how we move them forward and how we only fund a phase of it or a part of it. My concern has been since we budget and a biennial, not annual, where I'm used to, you hear many districts say, and it's a concern of mine, that when we don't at least fund it in its entirety, and you can pull back if there's drastic enrollment drop or something, we create those gaps that you all are talking about. And a fast track project where if a design comes out of one budget biennial and construction another, if we do everything right and the districts, you know, I know they're back here and I know they're out there, 5 years, and that's if a project goes swimmingly well. You know, 5 years it takes to get something built right now when you do it that way, because monies are coming out of 2 different apportionments and 2 different budgets. And so I appreciate you all having this discussion. They're tough discussions. There is going to be someone who says, why them, not me? But, you know, I think good thoughts and change start somewhere, right? They have to begin somewhere at some point in time. So I appreciate you guys discussing as a committee these tough issues.
So am I understanding that the design actually is not relevant anyhow if it was a tear down and a rebuild, and we're discussing a remodeling now. So there is no design out there right now, correct?
Not that would align with what Senator Landon suggested.
Okay. I actually would like, is there any public comment? Is there anybody from the district? No one from the district here. Is there any other public comment? Oh, would you like to comment? Please come forward. Mr. Bartlett, please.
Mr. Chair, Dave Bartlett, Laramie 1. Thank you for letting me speak to this. I appreciate the conversation and the thought process of doing these kind of midlife renovations. You know, Laramie 1, we've done several over time, which has added 25 to 30 years of life to a facility. The issue we run into is there's not really a process or a policy out there that allows us to come to the department or the commission to do that. We've done a lot of work on our facilities and done minor renovations using major maintenance money. Johnson Junior High and McCormick Junior High are 2 great examples of buildings that are in grave need of renovations. We've spent about $5 million of major maintenance over the last 3 years to do small portions. But these are schools that really need significant dollars to be able to bring them back up to where we are today. So what I'm encouraged by the conversation. What I would like to ask is there the potential that maybe this committee could create policy or a process where school districts could apply for these buildings that are further down the list to be able to do these renovations. You know, major maintenance. We have 50 buildings, so we're spread thin and we try to do the best we can. But, you know, I do think that's an opportunity that we could take some of these buildings that are moving up the list and knock them back down by doing this. But right now, I don't know of a process that I can do that other than potentially going to my local legislator or somebody on the committee and asking if it can be added at the end. So.
Okay, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I really appreciate your comments. I mean, I think my hope today is, and I don't know how the motion will go, but I really like that it could set that precedent. You know, I know the frustrations that we've had all over the state, but particularly here in this big district. You're right. We've got a lot of work to do, and I hope we can lean into that plow in these next few months and start trying to get a little further ahead down here. But I like the idea of this partnership, that maybe we can develop this. When our district came with this idea this fall and suggested that they could do a ton of work and get us up to a level where we could, if with state help, look what we can do with these two buildings. My goodness, what a great model. I mean, that's exactly what I think we could help some of the buildings you just mentioned, Dave. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. I think it's got some potential. I really do.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
A great example of this is, you know, when Director McComey was head of the department, they went to the commission and they did what's called commission directed component level funding. And they brought a large sum to this body. You all approved it. It went through the process. And that $10 million is what we used to renovate Dillon Elementary. You know, that's a 55-year-old building that we're going to get another 30 years out of it. And we often speak to the fact that our buildings are 50-year buildings, but we've often said if we can do a half-life renovation, we can get 80 out of them easily. But it does involve more than boilers, roofs, and fire suppression. It really allows you to bring it up to today's standard, whatever that may be in the future for instructional delivery. So thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Is this our last committee meeting or do we have another one? This is our last one for the select committee. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think it would take some statutory revision to create a process for these renovations, these midlife renovations, as anything other than how we're doing it right now, which is by motion in the budget. But honestly, it would probably be the most valuable thing we could do at this point in time, looking at how our fleet of schools is and the fact that we have most of them in pretty darn good shape. We really do. And when we 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we started talking about shifting to preservation mode instead of build mode as our priority and focusing on major maintenance. These midlife renovations to get 30 more years probably are our best investment moving forward. And we don't have a process for it. Unfortunately, it's not like you can throw that onto a component list. And if it just shows up as, if you're a 0.25 or something and you want to shift it down to a 0.15, then you're just going to wait 5, 6, 7, 10 years or whatever until you erode your quality to get high enough on the list so that you can then have a remedy. And that doesn't make any sense from the state's perspective. So this is a good idea. This is something we should really be pursuing. Maybe we can contemplate what those changes would look like, work with staff for the budget session and try and get everyone to give some thought to how we would put that together. If we don't have another select committee meeting, then we might just have to look at a one-off. We can also study it during the next interim, but it might not be bad to try and focus on getting something on the books. But honestly, I'm certainly supportive of the idea of this motion of getting this in the queue. It'll get some attention, get some more discussion at the very least. I don't know how we all end up voting on it in the end if it goes to the session, but if we can get 35 more years out of 2 schools for $10 million, that beats everything else we've done today, probably. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I don't really have and I think that's actually the way to go. My question is a question of equity, and might I have the director, and Paul, maybe would you come forward again? What process does the department or the commission have for, I imagine there's a plethora of schools in this very same boat. I know we have a bunch in Laramie 1, but I'm sure there's all over the state where we could look at these older schools and suggest a renovation to extend their life. But it seems to me that we're taking two schools here just because we have two legislators from the district. No one from the district there is asking for this that I know of. How are we to make this equitable? Are we just going to pick these two projects? I mean, it's a good idea. I really think we need to spend our money wisely this way. The question is, to me, a question of equity. No other districts are, I guess, this is not available to anybody else unless there's a process, which I think we talked about just now, creating. Can you tell me how the commission or the department looks at providing a list of prioritized renovation projects?
Mr. Chairman, the process that you're talking about is what we undertook, and I believe it was in 2016. In particular, we started looking at the facility condition index scores for individual systems, the FCA scores. And what we were identifying at that point in time was schools that had clusters of those needs. And that's how we were identifying what Mr. Bartlett referred to in identifying the commission-directed component projects. And so in the case of Laramie 1, there had been identified a number of FCA scores that were in need of remedy. And so they proposed those to our commission and to you, and they were funded. What occurred with Laramie 1 in particular is they identified that if they could cluster even the dollars that they were given into a particular school, which is what is happening with Dildine right now, they could essentially refresh that school. So we started the process before by identifying those FCA scores and essentially funding the needs based on the assessments. And our assessment is quite aged at this point in time. And the dollars were presented to the commission. They approved, this body approved, the legislature approved. So it's a version of that would work because we could identify it essentially system by system and cluster those together to do improvements for schools that have more of those improvements that are required. Because sometimes it's clear you fix the roof on a school and it doesn't have other needs. But then there's other schools where those needs, there's many of them. There's not just a singular need. And I think it would be a derivation of that process that we would probably utilize to be able to identify those needs.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Severson, thanks for your comments. As I said, I was happy to second a motion on this because I think it gives us a really good opportunity to have this conversation. Is this a good precedent that we might set, which would allow other districts to do the same thing, or is it a bad precedent?
So I can give you my opinion on this.
I'll give you my one eyebrow raised up.
Yeah. So in the 5 months I've been here, this is the healthiest conversation that I've been part of. I don't know where this goes or how it rolls out, but I'm seeing things that don't coincide with my 30 years of background in this area. We let scores go down and don't do work until it qualifies for something. We mothball, we demolish because we have too much square footage. And we do these things that for me are perverse logic, but it fits within our system and our confines because that's what we have right now. And it didn't make sense to me in general, and it doesn't when an elementary school from a few years ago was 15 million, and now it might be 30 million. So all the more of the preservation of the existing building. Where I come from, land is scarce. And so therefore, new buildings are scarce. So you have to take care of that existing building all along the way. And the further you don't, it slips from component to major maintenance, where major maintenance isn't enough. Then we talk about renovation, but it's truly not. If there's a gap where it falls in there, you're talking about reconstruction, which is a lot deeper than renovation, you know, and is all that still better than a brand new school? Possibly, if it still meets the educational requirements. So looking at this as a whole and deciding, is this the way we should go? It's going to create more dollars somewhere, but I think the dollars that you do spend are going to be spent in a better way. We're not going to design and not construct. We're not going to let something fall into a greater disrepair. We have to do more. It's that win the battle or win the war. And to me, it's a healthy conversation. And I'll just throw one in there also that I hope I don't light a fuse, but I don't understand. At some point in time, we built a building. Let's just say it's 100,000 square feet. And there's only kids in there right now to the tune of justifying 60,000 square feet. So apparently we use capacity to generate major maintenance dollars. And I don't understand that because the building is still 100,000 square feet. And so these are things I'd love to see it discussed and brought up because we get here over 30, 40 years through a lot of incremental laws and rules that made a lot of good sense at the time. But when you look at it all and then you back map it, or you bring in brand new eyes from the outside, they're questions that keep me up at night. So I don't think these are bad conversations. I think it's, for me, it's a very healthy conversation.
Okay, good. Thank you. Representative Harshman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, and on in support of the motion. And I think just to give you a little local kind of history here, our school district has done this previously with an elementary, just finishing up Park Elementary, which was on the list, off the list, on the list, off the list for as long as a decade. And so as previous speaker from Laramie County spoke about, used major maintenance money, some general fund dollars as well, which of course gets criticized on that side of it. And because they had to do something because the process just didn't work. And so here we have two schools. Pineview was built in 1955 in conjunction with the Wyoming School for the Deaf. And of course, the School for the Deaf is no longer, but parts of the infrastructure as far as the boiler and those kind of things are located in the state part that operate also in the school part. And so it's a situation that really, it's been up for design, but the district, I think, thinks can come in and do some remodel, reconstruction, and eliminate modulars, provide security entrances, all those things, and then get the newest technology like these other new schools around the state have. Similar story with Evansville. And that building was built, I think, in 1965. So, and when you look at the cost of these new elementaries, these elementaries now would cost 15 to 20 million. You can see we're funding a large one for 33 million in this budget. And we're talking about 6 million to kick out another 30 years or more for these buildings and provide these kids, there's 300 kids basically in each one of these schools, really, the same opportunity that other kids around the state have. And so these are really two of our last kind of holdouts in Natrona County. And they're sitting down there at 89, 90 on the FCI score. They're moving around. It'll be years. And then when they come up, it's going to cost a small fortune. And I'm all about saving money. And you save money by putting cash in the bank and let the investment grow, or you invest in these capital projects because the inflation rate on these is 6-10% a year. So it'll be the best money we ever spend, and put some Wyoming people to work, and then benefit our kids for the next 30, 40 years. So I think it's really, it's a penny wise, pound foolish deal. And we've done a lot of this over the years. I think I'm the longest serving member now. School facility's been on this for, about 15 years. We've done a lot of these over the years because although our process is pretty good and we continue to improve it, there's these gaps where people fall in kind of the crack. And so what does a district have to do? I mean, use major maintenance, use general fund work the process. And so that's really what we're trying to do for these couple schools right here. So encourage the committee's support of this and then continuing as we move forward in the next interim to keep working this idea. We'd save the state money and do some real good. So, and again, 300 kids in each one of these, that's larger than some of the K-12, well, with the K-12 building we're building right now intensely. And so there's a lot of customers here that we're trying to serve. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Senator Cost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other thing in talking of equity that I think about is a number of our communities are attached to those schools in those areas. And by moving it out, demolition, and then relocating, it becomes an issue of all of a sudden we've lost kind of our central area. The idea, if it's a sound building that can be brought up and we can save money, I think is a twofold win for us, because number one, we're saving the money. Number two, we're preserving the integrity of that in the community. And I think that's pretty important. I know we have one in Powell that's in the same situation, and it's been worked on to where it's in pretty good shape. And I don't know that anybody would say that it's worse off than the two new ones that we have. So.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a lot of complexity here to this also, and we need to work out a lot of concepts moving forward, because I think this is the right approach. But at the same time, we should probably know going in which schools 5-10 years from now we think are going to be ready for some type of renovation, and which ones we think were just designed poorly. I think of the university housing project where we did an analysis on all of the dorms, and the only dorms that were worth saving that we've got right now are actually Crane and Hill, right? The oldest ones that still occasionally occupy people, because they were made well. Exactly. You could keep using those, and everyone looks at the tall ones and says, probably better to knock them down. As we look at the list of schools, this is probably the type of conversation that we should be having. And when we do our next FCI analysis, maybe that's part of that analysis is simply the question, as we're working the facility, is this one that we should schedule for renovation, or is this one that we should be contemplating, what is its current usable life, and which is the most cost-effective remedy concept for the planning stage, because we're going to have to start bringing more money to the renovation side instead of the building side, and we need to know what that looks like. Theoretically, if we fully funded major maintenance, we wouldn't have to have this conversation about providing additional funds right now for a renovation, because a fully funded major maintenance system contemplates the fact that you would have to do these types of renovation. And we have chronically underfunded it between 0.5% and 1% for as long as I've been in the legislature. So here we are with a request for additional funds for renovation. And again, I think it's probably a perfectly reasonable investment. Getting to the idea of trying to put forward a process, I think we can do these two things at the same time, try to move some things down this path. Maybe as we discuss it, maybe we should be bringing some more dollars to provide funding for other projects around the state for renovation. That's something we can look at later. It's too bad we don't have one more meeting of the select committee to explore this further, but we kind of have the hand we're dealt right now. I think there's a lot of work ahead on this process, though, that we need to get done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this discussion a lot from the three individuals on this committee from the center part of the state, clearly fighting for their constituency and what's going on up in their community, and recognizing this. And I also recognize, Mr. Chairman, you for allowing Mr. Bartlett to testify a little bit and give us a little bit of background on Laramie County 1. Clearly, we've got two large school districts here facing very similar issues, and we're not the only ones. We've heard from throughout the state that this is a growing issue, and so it's something that we need to address as a committee. There's no doubt about it. We clearly have a need and something that doesn't fit within the parameters that we have, and the definition of his insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results each time. And we have clearly been doing the same things over and over, and it's not working. So What I fear about going forward and approving this motion is that we have set the precedence that all you need to do is find somebody to put in the select school facilities interim committee and have them come forward and put an amendment to the budget bill and have them come forward and put it there and explain why. And hopefully they can convince your committee to carry their message forward and approve these major renovations, if not reconstruction processes. I don't find that to be fair and equitable. I don't. What I am concerned about is that sets a dangerous precedence that now this committee, as opposed to looking at things on a holistic scale and recognizing that the whole state is what we are responsible for, we are then only fighting for our individual districts and those that we represent locally instead of globally. And I don't think that's a good situation for us to be put in, nor is it a good situation for this committee to recommend to the Joint Appropriations Committee in any way, shape, or fashion that that's the recommendation from all of us, because it's not going to be a yes or no vote all the way across the board. I think I will be voting no on this particular motion. And what I do believe we need to address, and I agree with Senator Rothfuss on this, we currently have a need that needs to be addressed. We don't have the time to do it. This is something that needs to be addressed. And I've already asked Tanya to take down notes that this is something we address in the next interim work. I feel that approving this particular situation right now it's an unfair and undue situation to the rest of the school districts. The school districts that have been using the major maintenance money and the general fund, as Representative Harshman has said, continue doing that. Let's work on what we can, and then let this committee do what it does and what our obligations are within statute, and that is to fix these issues. And so I would recommend that, I'm going to ask for a no vote, and then let's work on this as a committee and find a solution for this statutorily that the districts understand. And also it sounds like the department understands as well. So there's clearly a need. And I understand the need up in Natrona County right now, but I can tell you right now, I know that if I were to ask Mr. Bartlett to come forward, he could probably list 3 or 4 district priorities that he'd like $6 or $7 million a piece for as well. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to blow this budget any further than it already is. Approving this particular motion puts us up over $100 million pulling out a general fund to support these issues. And I just won't support that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further comment? Senator Landon.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I certainly understand a lot of the sentiment that was just shared. I disagree on a couple of things. That's not surprising. I agree to second this issue because it is unique. And when it came to us as projects that had already been worked on and shovel ready, I thought it was really appropriate that we have this conversation, and I really have appreciated it. I think it's good. I like the precedent that this would set, because I agree with the co-chairman. I think this district, I think there's a lot of districts out there that could benefit from this kind of policy if we were to establish it. I agree with Senator Rothfuss. I think there's a real opportunity here as we work into this next interim to maybe even add a new fold to the way we evaluate these schools out there. It would be very valuable to us to hold these up as an example and say, we're looking for other schools like this, that we can partner with our districts rather than rolling in over the top of districts or putting a stop sign up. Let's work together on these things, and maybe I bet you we could develop a pretty darn good list of buildings that we could go in and do this very thing to. Sure, it's always easy to just put up the stop sign and not pass it and just say we're not going to do it. This is a good time, I think, to try this out and get it going. We can put the details to any policy and any list as we go forward, but why stop this when we've got a beautiful opportunity where that school for the deaf used to sit? That's a state property. We got to do something with it. It's been designed for years, and the school district up there comes up with a better way of taking care of that school building. I think it's a great idea. And I think it's worth going forward with it. We can, obviously, it can be stripped out in one of those 27 steps that we take. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other comment? Just the last comment from me. I really do believe that it's the right thing to do. I am really disheartened about the process on how it came to us. I really don't like that at all. Frankly, we do need a process, as was mentioned. These projects are shovel ready, and I'm told by the department that it's not even what they have on their, they have a whole rebuild in their books. And so it sounds like the district hasn't been talking to the department about these renovations. They're clueless. And then all of a sudden we get, a political solution. I think it's a good solution. I believe this is how we need to tackle all these projects. We need to put renovation monies so we don't have to build new schools. We need to extend the lives of these buildings. Completely agree. But I'm really disheartened on how we're doing this. This is just not the way to do it. Okay. So hopefully, if this passes, we'll take care of these two projects, but hopefully this will be our cue to work something out where we don't have to do this anymore, that we identify all these schools prior, as Senator Ruffus mentioned, and we come to an agreement long before, he gets sprung on in an amendment in a budget bill. So anyhow, just my last two words. So that being said, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Okay, all those in favor, raise your hands. We can count. 2, 3, 4, and we have 5. Okay. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Fails. Okay. So hopefully we'll take care of that. Yes.
Is there another way we can put something that satisfies the interests of Representative Brown and others that have raised objections, Senator Cost, in this legislation that gets this ball rolling? I feel like we can do better than kick it to next interim. This last motion would have kept some momentum behind it, but before we move on, does anyone have any ideas of what they would support for a way we could do that? And an idea would be to put some money in for renovation that had no schools attached to it, where districts could come in and say, hey, we'd like to renovate. We could require a portional match of internal major maintenance funds where, we'll match 75-25 on a pool of $15 million or something like, I don't know, I'm just making things up right now. So that we can get this process going. I'm sure it wouldn't be terribly difficult for us to come up with a few schools around the state. We know that Natrona 1 has a couple. I wouldn't be surprised if Laramie has some, Campbell probably has some, Sweetwater probably has some. I don't think we'd be challenged to get a preliminary list. It would not be the exhaustive list that I think we need. But again, this is a good investment. And I'd be interested to hear from a good representative, Mr. Co-Chairman, and you, Mr. Chairman, on what a process could look like where we could get something into this budget as a proposal that two of you would feel comfortable with.
Yeah. To your comment, I think that's a very good idea. As long as, again, my heartburn was not with doing exactly what was proposed. My heartburn was with the process. If we want to pass an amendment with a dollar amount and let districts present to the department a list, apply proposals of these two projects as well, they'll probably be high on the list, I would imagine, especially if they're shovel ready. But allow a process where they can be evaluated by somebody rather than us in 15 minutes of committee meetings. Then I'm good with that. So if you want to propose that, with a dollar amount, I would support that fully.
Chairman.
We have Vice Chairman Brown first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like the idea. What I also don't want to do is a knee-jerk reaction in the process to try to keep the momentum going. My trepidation comes from hearing earlier in the meeting that we had everybody in the department ready to go for 2 days, and now we're back down to missing another employee. This is going to fall on the shoulders of staff at the department, whom is already understaffed, is already overtasked with everything else that's going on. And so my concern is the image that's running in my brain right now is the old game of Hungry Hippos. You're going to put out a couple of little marbles out there, and you're going to have a whole bunch of little hungry hippos sitting there smashing to try to get those marbles of money. And what happens to those that don't get it? This truthfully should require some sort of rulemaking process. It should go through a fairly large process, in my opinion. I think it's a much deeper issue that I think we need more than just this time to do. I do agree. Put $50, $60 million, great. That satisfies a lot of school districts that want to do this kind of work, but there's no mechanism for it right now. We've had these brought forward. I can certainly attest that if I asked Mr. Bartlett to come forward, he would be able to drop, $15, $20 million worth of the similar projects in Laramie County 1. Well, we've got 12 million and another 20 million there. Well, those two districts have stayed up 30 of the $50 million. That's a tough pill for me to swallow when our responsibility falls to the rest of the entire state and some of these other schools that need this assistance as well. So I don't have the answer right now. I believe it is a problem, and I always try to come to the table with solutions. This is a potential solution, but I think it's one that deserves a lot more vetting, rather than just sticking money in there and saying, staff, go do this and figure out a way to do it. I'm a little hesitant to do that at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the co-chairman. I'm concerned of throwing it on their shoulders without some kind of, how do we prepare? Where have you got anything already, which I don't think they would right now, prepared to say, here's the set or here's what we work with? I think we better make sure that we don't go to the old saying, get the cart before the horse. Let's make sure this is a good idea, and I think it's got merit for the entire state. I'm not against it, but I still think, let's not jump too quickly. Let's make sure that we've got a well set up plan that we can go forward with, that in the end, everybody has the same chances and everybody has the equity of what the evaluation is, rather than some are ready now, some are not. I just think we got to be a little careful.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought this discussion had enough merit that I'm really glad that we brought it. And I appreciate that we had a district out there who stepped up and did the kind of work they did to put it in position that we could bring it to all of you. I think that we're probably at a juncture where we need to take it into a next interim. That would be my first blush, and that's fine. I mean, some of the processes have to be slowed down a little bit, and I think that's what we're looking at. Just a little historical perspective. I've been on this committee not quite as long as Representative Harshman, but a long time. And be prepared, because this bill isn't done. And when we get it out on the chamber floors, to the two chairmen, you're going to have to battle and fight, because there's going to be things brought to it. People want to add some things. I'll never forget the biggest school at that time in our state was coming up for rebuild. And we know which one that is. It's a historical marker in the center of town. And in order to build that school, we had to build Du Bois and Shoshone first. And that happened out on the floor of the Senate. So influences do come to bear and they do come in, and we'll continue to always have that on this committee. But the work always gets done too, and we do good work. So good discussion, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Committee, what's your pleasure?
That's it.
That's it? Okay, there wasn't going to be an amendment, right? Okay. All right, hearing no discussion, could we please have a roll call, please?
On LSO, 22 LSO 0160 as amended. Senator Hutchings. Senator Cost.
This is with just this amendment.
On the bill.
On the bill. I'm a yes.
Thank you. Senator Landon.
Aye.
Senator Rothfus.
Aye.
Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Harshman.
Aye.
Representative Jennings. Representative Walters.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Brown.
Aye.
Chairman Pappas.
Aye.
You have 8 ayes, 2 no.
Okay, so the bill has passed. Committee, and that brings us to the end of the agenda. I'm going to open it up for public comment for any other, buddy who wants to address us, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Jimmy Phelps, Superintendent of Washakie 2 in Tinsley. I would like to thank all the members of this committee for including our project in your motion. Part of our building was built in the 1930s. Part of it was built in the 1950s. And the newest part of our building is almost 50 years old. This is a big deal for our community, and on behalf of the citizens of Tinsley, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further public comment on any topic? Okay, committee, I think that wraps up our work. I'll adjourn it. And we'll see you. Everybody
else will see each other in a couple.
Everybody else